Dave Fields here today. Welcome to Shoot Me Straight. Eddie Gallagher's out. Today we have Brad Goode, pastor of Good News.
Church was there first.
Church was there first. And then he came in and took it to another level.
So it's not named after me.
Yeah. I have more questions than anything for you, especially as a pastor.
Yeah.
I look at a pastor as like it would be one of the last jobs I would choose.
Yeah.
It is, because like
But I think that's good because I don't think you should choose it.
Oh, interesting.
Like in a lot of ways, it's a calling, right? Like, and do you really feel like God's called you into this? Because I think if God hasn't called you into this, like it's going to be miserable.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, it's not a 9 to 5.
That's
okay,
right.
Got it. There's a lot of things that are not. You own your own business. It's not a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But on your own business, your work ethic and you do everything to eventually build a lot of wealth and to build hopefully recurring revenue. So you build back your time. That's the real flex, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But for a pastor, it's almost like you work really great at your job you don't get any credit for it. You know? It's like, how do you manage like the works? I don't know.
Manage the work schedule.
Yeah, well, and be able to go, like, it's satisfying to have goals and hit your goals and do all those things, but for a church, it's like, what are my goals? My goals are my members to know the Lord, to equip them to, it's like, it's not numbers, it's not metrics necessarily, or shouldn't necessarily.
Yeah. So I would say the big difference in that is the difference between lead measures and lag measures. And I think in a business world, you're really measured by lag measures. How much did you sell? How much did you produce? How much did you do all these things?
Yeah.
And I think when you get into that in church world, that becomes like very works-based in a sense of like, all right, look how good we did. We converted 25 people this week or like whatever, But I think when you think of it as lead measures of like, these are the things we feel called to be faithful to, and we're going to do those, and we're going to plant those seeds, and we're going to be good, and we're going to believe that like the Lord's going to bring the harvest He wants to bring in that. And so like, how do we measure against like a lead measure of like, am I in these places? Am I putting myself in these situations and circumstances? Are we putting together beautiful Sundays that point people to Jesus? Are we, like all those things? And it isn't so much like the backside of that. Like I feel like that growth, I feel like is really on the Lord. Like we're just faithful to what we're called on the front side. Yeah. And I think in a church world, when you start measuring staff and people, but like those lag measures, like how many kids were there? How many people were there? That can just get super toxic really fast.
Yeah. Dude, and that's because people will judge. I don't know if there's another industry that people judge more than a church do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I look at other businesses and they do incredibly shady stuff, and I'm like, okay, I get it. You don't, but you look at a church that does something that every other business does, and you think, oh, how could they? And,
that's right.
And
that's for sure. There is a funny element about how like I think everybody thinks they could run a church. Like there's something about that. Like nobody walks into Target and like, they ought to do, but at church every Sunday, everyone's like, they ought to do. Like, and I think that's complex for us here where we are in Santa Rosa Beach because we are really this like melting pot of so many different, it's like a big gumbo in the whole area because you got people coming from all over the place. Generally, those people have been a part of things that were successful in a lot of ways. And so when you see that, it's like you get all these people with all these ideas that have experienced church, have experienced life really in so many ways that worked for them in those old places, and they want to bring that here. And so then you get like so many opinions of people that have been, well, we did this, we did that. It's good.
And you got a lot.
But it's cool because like God was working in that, and that's beautiful, and that's good. But I think it's for us, it's so important to know like who we are because otherwise we would just be all over the place all the time.
Yes. If Santa Rosa Beach is really interesting to me. Since I moved here, it seems like few people are actually from here.
Yeah, for sure.
In general, they've made it somewhere else. You have to be fairly wealthy to live like around 30A.
That's right.
And it's not like, there's not a ton of, I'm just a teacher.
That's right.
Like, I'm a teacher and he has a law firm.
Or, that's right.
Or they've made it somewhere else and they've chosen to come live here for the lifestyle, and I get it. Same for us.
Yeah.
But then you got a lot of bosses. You got a lot of entrepreneurs.
That's right.
And they have a lot of ideas.
That's right. And I can talk a lot about this. So we say our mission to our church, we say we exist to help people build their lives on the reality of Jesus. And that language is very intentional. It comes from the backside of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus kind of lays out life in the kingdom of God, this vision for that, what that all looks like. And then he says, so what are you going to build your life on? He says you're going to build your life on a firm foundation, you're going to build your life on the shifting sand. And the joke we kind of like to make is that like a lot of people move here to literally build their life on the sand. And it's like, if we can get to the beach, like everything's going to be good. If we can get to the beach, like our marriage, we're going to love each other again. If we can get to the beach, our kids are going to quit being so weird. If we can get to the beach, the money problems will disappear. If we can just get to the beach. And I think in a lot of ways, for a lot of people getting here is like the culmination of the American dream. It's like we won capitalism. Like we won America. We won life. And it's like we've got this. We got the beach house. We got the life of leisure. We've got all of these things. But the reality is the golf cart. The eventually is like wherever you go, there you are. And all those things that were true there become true here eventually. Geography fixes none of those problems. And so then you're sort of confronted with, okay, like we have like everything the world has to offer and it didn't do it. So like what now? Like what are we building our life on? And so we like to joke about poverty, not joke about poverty, but you know what I mean? Like this idea of poverty that you have this like divine center. Right? This is like where God would call us to be, who God's created us to be. I mean, this is like us living as Jesus would call us to live, right? But the further you get from that, the more you see poverty. And we tend to think of poverty as an external poverty. Like we think about it like, I went on a missions trip to this developing country and everything was so bad because you could see it. It was like a physical poverty. Like the clothes look bad, the houses look bad, the streets look bad, there's corruption. There's all these things that lead to that physical external poverty. And generally, you find somebody on every one of those trips that comes back to their church and they'll sit and they'll say something to their church or their youth group or whatever, and they'll be like, it was so crazy. Those people, like, they had nothing, but there was like so much joy in these people we met. Like there was this internal sense of like, God was just with them. Like the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. Like they prayed that because they needed bread daily and like they got it and they felt it and they like, God was just so tangible and real in that, even though the external poverty was so obvious.
Yeah.
Like we, I think, are just as poverty stricken as those places here. We're just on the other side of the spectrum where it's not an external poverty that's in stuff. It's an internal like poverty of spirit.
Yeah.
And it's the same separation from like what should be. And I think like when you look at that, it's all the things that nobody sees. It's like massive debt. It's like massive pill addictions. It's massive like addictions to plastic surgeries to look perfect. It's like buying another car, another boat, another bigger this. Like nothing's ever good enough. And like it's this constant, like we got to get to the next. And it's almost like that arrival fallacy times 10. Like if we get there, we'll be happy. If we get this, we'll be happy. If we get to the beach, we'll be happy. Well, that didn't work. What if we get to the beach and get a new car? We'll be happy. What if we get to the beach and get a bigger house? We'll be happy. What if we get a beach house? Well, that's not the beach. We need to live on the bay. Like, let's move up there. Like, that's where the happy people, it's like, you're just always like, what's next? And it's like, I think you could get somebody who could come from one of those developing nations, come spend a month here, go back in front of their church, and they would say, it's really weird. Like, they have everything and they seem really miserable. Like, and it's like, there's this like separation of poverty on two ends. Like, there's the external where you have this purity of heart. And this is, I'm painting with a broad brush here. I get it's not every person, every situation, but like, and then you can come to a place like this, and not even just here, but just like consumeristic, wealthy America, right? I mean, like, it's like we have all the things that say we should be happy, but it didn't do anything. And it's like, they're both poverty. They're both separation from God's intent, but we somehow don't see this as the brokenness that it is.
Yeah.
And I think we struggle with that here. Like, we just see that a lot here.
Yeah.
And it's like all these things that are so internal. Like at our church, we just opened a counseling center and it's like booked up immediately. Yeah. Those needs, because there's that internal stuff that just like, what do we do with this? And I just, for me as a pastor, I think Jesus is the answer to all that.
100%. It's wild. You had to start having reverse missions, have them start coming to America.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We've joked about that too, about having like retreat centers here and things like that, because it's like, we want to bring people to this place to like heal and be restored, not come here to like impress and show off. Yeah. And like how to think about this place in a different frame is big. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. I've noticed that even in America, you look at someone that they make $100K a year, which today $100K a year, I used to think if I ever made $100,000 a year, man, like I made it.
Yeah,
I hit
that's
it.
right.
Now you think about it, and you're like, $100K a month doesn't seem as impressive. It's wild. But you look at someone that's a billionaire in their lifestyle, right, versus someone who makes $100K a year. The difference between those two people, and sometimes you would, if you just looked at it externally, okay, minus all the stuff.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times that $100K a year, man, they got great relationships. Mm-hmm. They have time with their family. I mean, I do think it's nice to have the flex of time.
Yeah,
I mean, that's right. And not debt.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
There's some wisdom in there, but the biggest flex is time, and then being able to invest in others and people and relationships and
that's right.
And
I think we've gotten this idea of that like a life of leisure is the goal. And I've seen that so many people down here. They get down here and it's the whole idea of like, what's that song, like your butt in the sand, a beer in your hand, and like that's cool for like a week. Some people can do it for a month, some people can do it for a few months, but eventually it's like, I don't think I'm created to do that. Yeah. And it's like, how are we actually making an investment into somebody else? Who's investing into us? And living this really rich relational life where we're dependent on other people, people are dependent on us, and we get so caught up, I think, in the idea of like, if I can do it all by myself, that will be the best. And it's funny, like in our world, we celebrate like isolation, we celebrate this idea of like, if I can just get alone, if I can get in a gated community, if I can get to where other people can't get to me, like I'll win. But it's so funny because everything in the gospel is like, that's actually like totally missing the point. Yeah. Like if we're really supposed to be in relationship with people, it's like, how do we bring those things down and get around more people? And I mean, just being around the studio here, like, right, you got people walking all over. There's such a richness to that of those relationships. But so many of the ideas we're sold as like the trophies of consumerism, America, all those kind of things, is like, no, you'll get like out, in the woods by yourself, nobody will be around, it'll be awesome. And you're like, well, it's really not. Like it's you're just not wired for that. Yeah. And so, I mean, maybe a season for that. I've done a silent retreat for a week. I've done that before, but there comes a point where you're like, that was good, I needed that, but also like I'm built for this. Yeah. Like I have the silence to help me go do the things I'm really, anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you get somewhere by yourself, then there's just you.
Yeah, that's
and you're not that great.
That's right.
That's
right. That's right.
So when you did you first become a pastor? Was Good News your first church?
No, well, first time I was a lead pastor.
Okay.
So I grew up in a really small town, about 2,500 people. My grandfather was a pastor there. And as I was about a senior in high school, I'd felt this call to ministry, but I wasn't sure what exactly it was I was going to do. And honestly, I think I just didn't have my eyes open to a lot of other opportunities. And so I was like a senior in high school, and I had this really like kind of freak out moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, am I only doing this because I hadn't thought of anything else? Like, it's a big commitment, all this kind of stuff. My grandfather, I saw him do it. I respected that so much and like wanted to be a part of a church that was so beautiful and healthy like his was. And so I was like, I'm going to go do that. But senior year, I had this like freak out and I was like, oh my gosh. So I stopped and I was like, well, what would I do? Like if I hadn't thought about any of this, what would I do? And so I thought I'd go into the music business and I would love to own a venue. And, to just churn out acts, like just being able to be a place that hosts all kinds of stuff, doing cool things with it. And so I thought, well, I need to like explore that. And so I thought, what should I do? I only got a couple weeks left. So I was like, I'm going to throw a party, a graduation party. And we're going to like pretend like I'm living into this venue thing. And so I rented the local labor hall. And I called this guy who was like this laborer. He's like, he's like smoking a cigar. He's like, you want to do what? Kind of thing. And I was like, so can we host this party? So me and a buddy, we pull this thing together. We invite kids from like all over the county. It was a real rural area. Invited all these bands, booked this band from Chicago to come down, like hyped this whole thing up. And dude, it was just like the biggest success ever. Like, I mean, there's just hundreds of people there. We charged cash at the door. So as the whole night was over, I can remember this clear as day. I'd borrowed my dad's little truck and I was driving back from the thing. We closed it all up and I literally just had like piles of cash in the car. Like it was the most money I'd ever had in my life, sitting cash in this truck next to me. And I was driving home and I was looking at all that money and I thought, yeah, I want to be a pastor. Like that was cool. That was fun. But like, this is what I really feel called to, and it's like, I could do that. That was fun, but it was just like fun.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't feel like it was like what I was supposed to do. And so that's kind of a cool confirmation I feel like the Lord gave me of like, no, like this is what you're supposed to do.
I thought you were about to say, I looked over at that cash and thought, man, I want to be a drug dealer.
Yeah.
That's what happened to me.
No, the quick cash. No.
Be like, thank you, Lord. You gave me my.
That's right. So it was kind of fun. And, but it was a cool, like, sweet grace that I feel like the Lord gave me to just be like, you're on the right path. Do this.
That's cool.
And so it was good.
Yeah. I think that's really important to test against.
Yeah. That's right.
I tell guys in their 20s, I feel speaking back to earlier where you're talking about like your place and being right there in the center, away from poverty on both sides.
Yeah.
I don't say it a whole lot because a lot of people you're talking to, they're struggling in different ways and you're listening to them. But man, there's rarely a day that goes by that I don't feel so blessed. Not money wise.
Yeah.
Blessed money wise too, but like blessed in the sense I'm doing exactly what I love to do. I feel like I'm in my place, in my lane.
That's good.
And every day I get to help tons of people.
Yeah.
You know, like how
That's
cool
awesome.
is that?
Yeah,
and
that's really good.
In such a authentic my way of who I am and God made me to be. And so.
But can I say this to interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
I don't know that that's as much as where you are is your choice to choose that where you are.
Yeah.
Because I think somebody listening to that hears that and it's like, I got to blow up my life. I got to change everything. You know, like I got to get to where it's all good. But I think that's that arrival fallacy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like, well, if I can do that, if I can have a podcast, if I can do that, like life would be awesome. Like, I think you would just move the goalposts. Like, it'd be like, well, now I need a bigger podcast. Now I need another thing. I don't think that's as much situational, external stuff as that is internal.
True.
Of you've gotten to a place of like, okay, I got a podcast. I mean, you said this today, like, still don't even have it figured out. You know, there's these parts I want to figure out. But it's like, you're choosing to leverage what you have for good.
Yeah.
And I think that's more the thing.
I think the externals look different for everyone.
That's right.
Right? Mm-hmm. You be a plumber.
That's right.
And you're using but I think there is an element of you're using the cards that have been given to you.
That's right.
In a way that you're open-handedly to God. Like this office it's mine.
Yeah.
But in a sense, it's not either. I don't view it that way. It's a responsibility of mine.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's a tool, and how can I use this to create community? That may look different for someone else.
That's right. Because I don't think that's because you have a podcast studio.
No.
Because there's a lot of people who have podcast studios that are miserable.
Yeah.
Right? And so like that's the deal. But I just think like if you know, just to applaud you real quick, you said today's 24 years sober.
Yeah.
That's huge, dude. It's like, congrats on that.
Thank you.
And can you backtrack some like applause and behind that to make that good? But like 24 years of that, you're able to say that because you've done 24 years of work to get your head in that place. And I think if everything blew up and you ended up working at the Cefco up here behind the counter, you'd probably know the name of everybody who came in there. You'd be like shouting, high-fiving, like, dude, way to get, I mean, like, because you'd make that good because you've done the work to be able to say like, I'm going to make where I am good, verse being able to say, like, what's that verse in 1 Thessalonians? You know, it says, God's will is to give thanks. That's God's will for your life, is to give thanks and be grateful. You know, that's what it is. And so it isn't like to have a podcast. It's like, okay, this is what you're doing, but like, how do you leverage whatever it is you're doing for good? And I think that's a huge misconception that we just, as a pastor, like I see that all the time. People think like a new location, a new job, a new thing is going to fix it. But like if you're not at peace like here, and I mean there's always an asterisk of like, you know, you can work for a total jerk boss and everything's miserable. Like maybe that is true. But like most of the time, it's like if you can't be happy here, you're not going to be happy there.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. So when you're in that situation that it's like, I'm working at Cefco, right? You're going, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm not, there's a piece of it, I think, Brad, that I've had to grow through because even in that statement, it's kind of a victim statement. It's this victim mentality of, you know, this is how I grew up. But even though I'm 40 years old, like, it don't matter how I grew up. I'm a 40-year-old man.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's like.
That's right.
And I've dealt with that with guys that, I mean, people have been raped, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, process it, get through it.
Yeah.
Grow through it. Like, you have to. I'll give you a good one. I was adopted when I was a kid.
Okay.
Don't know my family, or my biological mom.
Yeah.
biological dad. I didn't realize my biological dad. I finally looked him up about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Which, interesting enough, he runs a computer store. Yeah, isn't that wild? But I like through it, like I could go, you know what? I was a baby. I was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. I couldn't control.
Yeah.
You know, what am I going to do? I'm 100% helpless infant. Yep. You know, well, I'm not 2 years old anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's right.
And to be honest, like that resentment was hurting me. Resentments isn't about the other person. It's about myself.
Yeah, that's good.
And I got to grow through those. And
that's right.
And so there's a part of it that's like this victim deal. So if you're in a place or occupation or whatever, that first it's going, okay, I'm just here for whatever reason. Who cares about the past? Yeah. What can I do with it now? Yeah. What are the main things with it? And then if it's a deal that's like, hey, I'm not in the right place. Yeah. What do I need to do to grow out of this and go somewhere else and get to? And it's not that you wouldn't move or change jobs or whatever, but while you're there, you can be happy. Yeah, that's right. If I'm working my butt off, when I started my software company, I was still counseling, and I was burnt to a crisp. You've been there. Yeah. Where you're just like people's sin and issues day after day, all day long. That's right. And you're like, dude, you get so callous to it. I mean, I'd have the last few guys that I'd try to rush to an ER and they'd die. Like, I was so callous to it. I'm like, okay, what's for lunch? Like, I just don't, you know. And so you're like, okay, I need to get out of here. As soon as I started working in my off hours, towards building Repbox and coming up with a plan and going on walks with my wife and telling her, hey, you just left your job, I'm going to leave mine. Yeah. Just trust me. Yeah, that's right. As soon as I started doing that, all of a sudden my current situation got so much better. Yeah. Because I had a plan and I had momentum going forward. Yeah, that's right. You know? And that's what filled you up, you know, and that's awesome. Yeah. And, you know, with a counseling, with a lot of roles, I think there's this funny conversation, like in my world, like in the church at large, about Sabbath, about rest, about health, and all those kind of things. And I think that's such a healthy, good conversation. I mean, like I shared with you a minute ago, I'm taking a sabbatical for 3 months this year. Like, that matters. Like, that stuff's super important. But I think sometimes we've made that the idol, is almost like our work serves the rest instead of our rest serves the work in some ways. And so how do we, like, get to a good place with all of that? And for me, I think there's a part of us that, how do we like play God in those situations versus how do we let God be God in those situations? And there's we did a mental health series at our church a couple months ago that was really helpful to a lot of people. But one of the big concepts, and again, broad brushes painting with here, was we said generally anxiety is like because we're so worried about the future. And generally depression is because we're so fixated on the past. And again, it goes back to that like holy center, like how do we stay in that place? But in some ways, you know, at the past, it's because we have this workspace understanding of things and we feel like we screwed up, we didn't do good enough, we're going to have to pay for this. Yeah. Like, what is that going to look like? And so we dwell on that. And if so-and-so would have done this, I wouldn't be in this crappy situation right now. If so-and-so would have done this, I wouldn't be if I had done this, I wouldn't be in this crappy situation right now. You know, you kind of look back. But you don't understand, Brad. That's right. And then to the future, we start to play God, right? And it's like, it's got to go this way. And if it doesn't go this way, like, it's never going to be good enough and it's never going to, you know, and you start playing that way. But again, it's like, this is so cheesy pastor cliche line, but it's like the present is a present, right? And so like, how do we get to have like our head, our heart, our feet all in the same place at the same time? Yeah. And to just like be here, like, and to be present in this. And I think being able to step into that place and say like, okay, God, like these are the cards I've been dealt. This is where I am. Like, what can I do to honor you? What can I do to like live well in today? Yeah. Because that's what we have to work with is today. And for you, like what filled you up was that Repbox thing. And with a counselor, like somebody shared this with me the other day. I thought this was really helpful. They said there's a lot of roles and there's a lot of seasons of life
where you need to think of yourself like a gas pump at the gas station, and like everyone who comes to you is just taking gas, like they're just taking from you. Like they grab the pump, fill up with what they need. You know, whether that's money from your kids, whether that's time from people, like, you know, knowledge from people, whatever that is. He said, but at the gas station every night when nobody's looking, a big tanker comes in and refills that underground. And if we think like that's just a perpetual tank, like that's never going to last more than a day or two. And I think we live sometimes like we don't have to fill that tank. And so it's kind of interesting to hear you say that, like, starting that new thing, like that filled your tank. That may not be what it does for everybody, but I think it's important for us all to know, like, what does fill us so that, like, we can live well today in a healthy sense and live with limits, live with boundaries, live with rest, live with Sabbath. But at the same time, that serves us doing the things we've been called and created to do. Yeah.
That's AA is, man, AA has been such a blessing in my life.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say AA, a 12-step program. Mm-hmm. I think that is right, tradition-wise.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just for today, you know, it's a focus on, hey, today I'm going to wake. I mean, it's for dummies in a lot of ways. It's so practical in the sense of, hey, wake up your morning med.
Yeah.
When we begin the day, we ask God to direct our thinking.
That's right.
You know, help us to be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking motives. You know, at the end of the day, it's a nightly review where you're going, okay, where was I selfish, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, we're careful not to drift into worry or remorse.
Yeah.
You know, morbid reflection. It's just going, it's just this pattern flow like a sink, like where you're getting in a rhythm.
Yeah, that's good.
And especially early on.
Yeah.
You talk about being out of rhythm.
Yeah.
When you wake up in the morning and start drinking at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, like.
That's right.
The rest of the day isn't going
to
work out.
It's cool to hear you say that. I'll plug a book real quick of a mentor of mine who I've never met, but it's a guy named John Ortberg. And he actually just got a book coming out called Steps. And it's sort of this, how the church can come alongside AA, step into that, and been able to see some of the stuff. And it's just awesome.
Yeah.
Like, so you should definitely check it out. I'm actually going to be preaching on it this fall.
Yeah.
And going out to California the next couple weeks from now to go spend some time with him to prep for that in the fall. But like, I think in our area, you know, I don't know how many people listening are from our area, but I think that's like the biggest secret issue of our area is just the absolute abuse of alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, it's just crazy around here.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think about, this is one I was going to ask you about, marriages? Like around here, I feel like their marriages struggle so much.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just exposed more around here since it's smaller.
Yeah.
Because we really have a pretty small community of locals.
Yeah, that's right.
But, man, I've heard more of marriage struggle than just about anything else.
Yeah. I think it goes back to some of that stuff we were talking about a little bit ago about, like, the geography is going to fix it. This life of leisure is the goal. Yeah. And I think when you get to those places and you and your spouse have no shared purpose, like they sort of become like a means to an end.
Yeah.
Like, you're supposed to make me happy, like, because all this other stuff didn't now.
Yeah.
And like, when you put that pressure on and those new dynamics come in, and a lot of people, I think they move here and there's a weird adjustment that has to happen where, like, things are more expensive, your house is smaller, your life looks different, things feel different. You don't have the same network of relationships you used to have in that old place. And again, like, even though they might have been frustrating or hard or difficult, whatever, in wherever you came from, when you get here to have to start and build those relationships over, this is a hard place to do that. I think our area in particular is a hard place to build community for a lot of reasons. Like, you know, one of them, like I just said, like, most people have moved to a smaller house, and in our culture, we put such status on house. So people are like, well, we can't have them over to our house because, you know, like, this isn't our real house. This isn't the long-term house. This is just the one to get us to the beach, you know, and they'll be embarrassed and we're not good enough. We're not, you know, all that. And so there becomes like this house shame almost that pushes you out of like those kind of relationships. And so you end up meeting at bars. You end up meeting in all these public places that spirals that drinking, that spirals the inch deep, mile wide kind of relationships, the what's new in town lately, let's go to that thing. Like, there's not a lot of established communal rhythms here, and I think that makes it hard. I joke to my wife too.
Which is so dumb. Like, who cares how, like,
some
of the best
But you say who cares, but like, apparently 98% of people care, you know, like, it's a thing, you know, like, it's a real thing, you know what I mean? You're filled with these shows, these magazines, these Instagram things, like, all this stuff of like all this beauty, and then you're like, well, that's not us. Like, we can't have anybody over here. We're not gonna, and I think that whole like game and mentality here is just like another gear.
Yeah, which stinks because you really want people to be in relationship with you for you.
Yeah,
right.
That's
like
right.
I want to be your friend.
That's right.
Not because I have an office or my house or
that's
stuff.
Right. That's right.
Or what I drive.
That's right.
I want you to care for me, for David, not for David's stuff and what he can do for me.
That's right. That's right. Know? That's right. And I think we have a weird place. I think our geography here is tricky and is another component of that. Like, I joke when we lived in Mobile before we moved here, I was like, Mobile is like a 4-function town. I always said between work and home, I can get like 4 things done. I could like go to the store, pick up dinner, go get the pharmacy, like whatever, wash the car. Here's like a 1-function town because everything's so far. I'm like, I could wash the car before I get home. Like I could maybe run to Publix if you need me to. It's just all so long and spread out and picking up kids. So I think that's a dynamic of it too. Yeah. Like you're not as nimble here in a place that's so spread out. Yeah. To be like, oh, let's just meet real quick because meeting real quick is like 2 hours and $50 for lunch. Feels like like it's just harder. So that's a real thing here.
I think that's part of the thing that helped me start with the office of trying to develop relationships with guys. Yeah. Of just being like, hey, come work from up here. Yeah. Especially guys. Right. It's hard for guys to build relationships. Yeah. When they have, wife and kids and full-time job.
That's right.
Because like, when are you going to do that?
That's right. Dude, like the stats around like male loneliness are just off the charts. Really? And when you talk about like deaths of despair, like males in a certain age, just off the charts, like in so many ways because of everything you're saying. Like being able to initiate relationships at this stage and phase of life is just really, really hard.
Do you get that a lot? I get a lot of guys that will like reference me as like one of their best friends or something. Yeah. And I'm like, it'll take me off guard because I'm like, man, I don't feel like I barely know you. That's right. But it makes me sad some because is that the depth of your relationships?
Yeah, that's right. It's like a bad preacher joke, but people like to say one of Jesus' greatest miracles having 12 close friends in his 30s. And like being able to like do that well, like that's so unbelievably hard. But like for us here, it is hard because time here is different. I think part of it even is our world. We're kind of like navigating through a lot of things right now. I think with social media, all that stuff. Like I always compare this stuff, social media world, I like to compare it to cigarettes. I think if you look back when cigarettes came on the scene, like everybody was smoking them, like this is fun, this is cool. Yeah, kids have one, like do that. And then like a couple of years later, everybody started coughing and they were like, this is weird, like what's going on, And in real time, they didn't know what was happening. But like with space, we look back and we're like, yeah, you had lung cancer, like it's obvious, right? Yeah. But like, I think for us right now, we are living in social media world, in tech world, at like the front end of cigarettes where like all this stuff's happening, but we don't have names for it. Like I think by the time my son who's 10 is in college, 10 to 12 years, you will have like names for the things we're seeing happen to people online right now. Like the radicalization of people where like we sense the patterns are the same. Like that uncle that did this friend that like he got in this blog and then all of a sudden he started doing this and then he was doing, like those patterns are the same, but I don't think we've had enough space to be able to like name them. And I bet in 10, 15 years, the same way we look back at people and are like, oh yeah, you had lung cancer. Yeah. We would look back and be like, oh yeah, they had this. Like it was obvious. Yeah. Like whatever that is, like it's happening to us. Yeah. And I think for us to be able to just be aware of that to some degree helps it. But I think as we talk about house, as we talk about relationships, so much driven by like we're just inundated with information and stuff. None of this is new. Yeah. But like you're just overwhelmed by it. But I don't think anything of it's new, but I also think it's like we've lost like the weight of it. Like it just is what it is now. Yeah. But it's like, no, it's really not. Like this is wild. Yeah. Like there's a great little book. You and Preston were reading it. That Oliver Burkham guy.
I was just thinking that.
And what his premise is so good. He's like, a lot of the anxiety we feel is like we should do everything because it's for the first time we're actually able to do almost everything. Like, I mean, not everybody, again, broad brushes, but like for a lot of people, like, you can't do everything, but you could do almost anything. Like we could book a flight to anywhere in the world today. Like you can do that. And knowing that you could do that, but also simultaneously knowing you're never going to be able to go to everywhere you want to go is like a weird thing that like most of the world has never really had to wrestle with.
Yeah. And like with information, like you're talking about, you could know just about anything.
That's right.
But you're never going to know everything.
That's right. That's right. And what's weird about it is like we think knowledge is going to fix things too. And like if knowledge was the answer, like so many problems would have disappeared.
Yeah.
But like so many of them are heart conditions. And I think even with relationships, you know, you can read like how to have more friends, how to do all this, but like it's really a heart issue where when we continue to project, I'm awesome, I'm great, like look at this, like people don't bond over that.
Yeah.
Like people bond when you say, you know, yeah, I was in rehab, today's 24 years. Yeah. Like people bond over that.
Yeah.
But like we keep those masks up in so many ways that like we never really get real connection.
Yeah.
And that's probably a whole
I mean, do you ever
podcast.
want to be friends with the perfect person?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm friends with them.
That's right.
And I hate him, Robert. I hate you.
That's good.
No, but like someone pointed out to me, they said, like your insecurities, your struggles, it's like grit on sandpaper. And it goes, you know, if you don't show any of those, obviously you have them.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you don't show any of them, it's like a flat piece of paper. What sticks to that?
Yeah.
Nothing. And it's like that, the gritty vulnerabilities is what
really
people
good.
stick to.
That's really good. That's one thing for me as a pastor here. And again, this goes to like lead measures, lag measures, but like building culture in our church. We went through this exercise a while back with this group, and they made us do kind of some self-reflection and personality tests and all that stuff. And at the end of it, they said, okay, I want you to come up with a 2-word mission statement for this season of life. And it has to be adjective, noun. So like, just what would that be? Like super simplify everything. And where I landed on that was building bridges. And like, I feel like I get to know people around here really quick because of my role. Like, so people are just a little more open. I feel like I can ask more candid questions than maybe other people feel like they can ask. For sure. And so I can get to know people really quick. And so it's become this like spiritual discipline of mine on Sunday mornings to walk around the room in between services and be like, who needs to know who? Because like, I know you have this issue, I know you have this thing, but y'all are never gonna tell each other that. So if I can just build that bridge to y'all and be like, y'all should know each other, you got this problem. And they're like, you know, it's super awkward at first. And they're like, we should go to, you know, and then like nothing makes me happier than like looking up and seeing them friends like 6 months later, because like, I knew that brokenness was in both of them and being able to bring them together. You know, I do that over good things too, try to do that with good stuff too. But like being able to connect people in those places is like a weird thing to be able to like offer people here. Yeah. That's never been a thing anywhere else I've been.
Dude, and probably one of the most impactful, if you have a guy that, say his wife left him. Yeah. Or you have another guy whose wife left him. Yeah. Right? Or they're going, or this guy's struggling with this, same as this, just knowing that someone else. Yep, that's right. It's weird. Eddie could probably speak a lot to this, of just like men suffering together. Yeah, that's right. There's encouragement in that. Yeah, that's right. They're absolutely. Like, I'm not the only one going through this. It's weird. A lot of times I see a lot of guys really feel like they're the only one struggling with, you know, they're stuck at a job that they don't want to be in or whatever it is. That's right. It's like, I'm the only one. Everyone else has figured it all out and they're all great. Right. Well, and you're like, none of them have. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest like spiritual battles we have that we don't call a spiritual battle. Like, I think there's a real sense of like when you read through scriptures about evil, about how evil works, what that looks like, you know, Hasatan, right, is the Hebrew word, Satan, and it translates the accuser. And like that is like the number one tool of evil is accusation. And when you look at truth is God's, evils is accusations. And so it's like, you're the only one, you're dumb, your house isn't good enough, you're this. And those like, I like to call them neutralizing narratives that just like lock us where we are. Like we just believe that in that narrative that we've been fed, and learning to be able to like speak truth, speak life into those situations, and to get rid of those neutralizing narratives can be like so unbelievably freeing. And like what you're saying is like, you know, the minute you see somebody else that just has it, you're like, oh, that starts to break down. Yeah. And the more you see, oh, they got this, like that stuff gets away, and you start to find freedom and be able, and going back to everything we've been saying about centering. Yeah. Like you're like, okay, actually, like this is like a normal problem. Like this is a normal self-pity. This is a normal fear. This is a normal whatever. And it kind of breaks the power of it. Yeah. But what that accusation does is drives us to isolation over and over.
And it's like, well, I can't go to that party because I'm not this. I can't have people over because I'm this. I can't. And it's like what evil does then is isolates at both ends of the spectrum. So it's kind of a
I got a good example of that. So I got a good example of that in parenting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about one of the few good examples I have in parenting. Most of them have been like, dang it. I lost my to do. Yeah. I usually have a good pause game, but with 4 kids at some point, it's like, you're all going to die. Yeah. But so my daughter came to me, my oldest daughter came to me a while back, and I was putting them down for bed, and I was saying their prayers. And she said, they open up a lot at night before they have to go to bed, right? Yeah. Their heart starts coming out because they know I'll listen and they know it'll buy them time.
Yeah, that's right.
And so my oldest daughter says, I was made fun of today. I cried. I cried at school.
Man, that sucks.
And some boy had made fun of her for wearing glasses. My very first thought was, what's his social security? Like, let me look this kid up. Obviously, my second thought, I just paused for a minute and just said a quick little prayer. Yeah. Because more importantly than some kid making fun of her, that's not going to be the first time. Yeah. Is connecting with my daughter. And so I paused for a second and I said, I'm sorry, honey. I was like, Daddy knows what that feels like. Yeah. When I was a kid, I had to wear glasses. Yeah. And I didn't say this, but I was like, I got the shit kicked out of me. Yeah. I got made fun of a lot. And she said, you did? Like, it surprised her. Yeah. She hadn't considered that her dad would know what she was going through. Yeah. And I said, yeah. And she's like, well, what happened? And she, and it created this bonding moment for me and her. Yeah. Where she didn't feel alone in that. And her dad was there.
That's huge. Yeah.
And so for me, it was a really good reminder of looking for those moments when they come. Yeah, that's just kind of being open for those moments.
That's awesome.
Pausing. Because my first reaction, my first thoughts are usually first thought wrong.
Yeah, that's good. It's good for you to know that.
Yeah, yeah. Especially for me, it's like,
and to believe it.
Oh no, stop. But really, the main goal with my kids isn't to beat up everyone that or to go to the board or go to the parents and have it out. Some kid made fun of her with glasses. My goal for my kid is her self-worth, her connecting with her.
That's right.
My relationship with her. Yeah.
That's
and
right.
So I do think that narrative, she was having that narrative and then pausing and having those connecting moments. Do you feel as a pastor what role is like Holy Spirit of when you're counseling, because you're counseling probably a ton?
Yeah, a fair amount. Yeah. It's not my forte. I mean, it's not what I'm best at, but I also think that's why we have a counseling center too. But I think, I meet a lot of people and have a lot of conversations in a lot of difficult places. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And when you're sharing the gospel also, like evangelizing, is there this pause and going, okay, God, what do you want me to say here? Yeah. And it may not be a conventional route. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to that, my head, my heart, and my feet in the same place at the same time. I think being able to truly listen to people is crazy powerful. I think a lot of times if somebody's really open to the Holy Spirit working in their life, the Lord may give us things to say, but I think a lot of times the best counselors in the world, the ones I've been to, have listened in a way that allowed me to say the thing I needed to say and allowed the Lord to work that through me. And so I try to not feel like, well, here's the tweet that will fix your life. If you just, this plus this plus this or whatever, 3 steps to, and I think sometimes people want that, but I think it often takes relationship to get to a place where the words I'm going to speak to them are really going to shape them. Sometimes the Lord speaks and, it's instant, but I've been on this big thing the last year, we started last year with this little sermon series that's been so like profound for me. I had an old professor one time. He said, if you preach from your weakness, you'll never run out of material. And so like, you know, a lot of times like when we're looking at stuff, I'm like, what do I need to hear? You know, like I can start in that a little bit too. But the idea that we want things so fast and quick, and the sermon series we did was called Some Things Take Time. And it was around this idea that like so much of Scripture is this agrarian language. You know, it's like mustard seed faith. And like the thing about a mustard seed, right, is that like it has to grow. It takes time. And then eventually it reproduces. But like we so often want things quick, but like the only things quick generally in nature are like weeds and storms. And so like in moments, my tendency is always like, we can fix this. Like just do this, and like you'll be good. But like rarely are those the issues. And I think learning to see what's the thing behind the thing and building relationship with people in a way that allows us to get to more like what are the real issues. So I think for me, like when my head, heart, and feet aren't in the same place and I'm counseling with somebody, I just want to fix it and like, let's do this. Like I can tell you what to fix. Like most everybody, like we said a minute ago, like if information fixed it, like we can fix everybody like this afternoon, right? Like we'll quit, you know, it's like weight loss. Like, I don't know, like eat less, move more, like gonna solve like 90% of the problems. But like there's like, you know, a whole industry built on like complicating that because it's not that easy. You know, it's so much more inside. So I think I've had to learn when meeting with people that like, even though I think I know the answer, there's so many layers, there's so much complexity, and like, how do we like listen in a real honoring way and build a relationship in a way that helps us journey with people more than just like having the right answer right away?
Yeah, that's great.
Do
you yeah, ChatGPT would fix that. You know,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
I really like how you said the listening and letting them, the person share what they need. Mm-hmm. Because that's really a lot of counseling is just a guiding.
Yeah.
The best things I've ever said were questions, to be honest.
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes nothing at all.
Yeah.
Where I've walked away from stuff and I'm like, I barely said a word.
Yeah, that's right.
And they were walking away and feel free and got what they needed. And
that's right.
But do you think we sabotage that sometimes with, I got to give them an answer. I got to give them.
That and like we're just uncomfortable with silence. You know, we're so used to like phones and noise and different things. I had to do this like CPE training, and it's like clinical pastoral education. So it's like pastors and hospitals, like how do you do that well? So I had to spend some time with this counselor, and we did a group and the whole thing. But towards the end of it, he was like, Brad, he's like, your problem is you can't handle silence, and you can't handle uncomfortable silence. And he's like, you need to get better at that. And he's like, so what I want you to do in the next few times somebody comes to you with a problem, or next time I walk into like a hospital room or a difficult situation, he said, bring a mint in and sit down and say, it's like, how you really doing? And put that mint in my mouth and don't talk until it's gone. He's like, just sit with the awkward, like just make them answer. And he's like, the longer it's awkward, they're just gonna start and they're gonna be like, well, I guess I need to talk. And then they're gonna start talking. And like, you know, it wasn't like some magic pill that solved everything, but like, there's a lot of truth in that for somebody like me too, who's just like, well, we can fix it. Like, you know, like oh, it's good, you know, like, and let's not feel the pain. Let's not, you know, do it. Like this is, I'm an Enneagram 7, if you're familiar with that. It's like, let's just go do the next fun thing. You know, like we don't have to worry about the bad things. Like do a bigger fun thing, and that won't matter. You know, so, but learning to like be with people and to really just like be quiet for a minute. And you'd be surprised how few people have a space to really like actually just talk and to be heard, and to be able to give that to people, I think sometimes just a huge gift.
Yeah, that's tough. That reveals a lot about what, like yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
I've had that a lot with my own anxiety, my own stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there's, depending on when, there's been times, you know, when you're just going, and then you've been doing that for maybe weeks, months, maybe years, and you have something hits where some self-reflection, and you're like, whoa, I've been reacting.
Yeah.
Pretty much for years or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought I was like really listening and taking people in, but instead I had so many windows open in the background.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way to say it.
I didn't have enough space, you know. I needed a reboot.
Yeah.
Like your week of silence, you know,
that's
lots of
right.
reboot. I have a buddy of mine who's really good at that. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to give him any credit of anything. He's a good friend, but he'll
know who he is.
Yeah, he will. He's incredible at allowing other people to just feel whatever they're feeling.
Yeah.
Some of it's just he's a narcissist, I think. But he had a session one time where he sat down with this guy.
Yeah.
And he started off, he didn't say a word, literally an hour and a half session with the guy that he said 0 words.
Yeah.
And he said about 30 minutes in, the guy just starts crying.
Yeah.
In the last hour, he just cried.
Yeah, that's wild. That's crazy.
And then they ended it. I'm like, what?
That's crazy. Yeah, it's because, and part of us, I just don't think we've been like taught how to reflect like that. You know, it's we did something in church a couple weeks ago because I think people don't quite understand how to like pay attention to their own thoughts and their own feelings. And I asked everybody in the service to like name like a difficult situation they were in. And I read Psalm 139 out loud. It's like, search me, know my heart, test me, and all that. And then we said, all right, and we're going to sit in silence, the whole room, for like 3 minutes. I was like, it's only going to be 3 minutes. And the whole church, we just like, so I was like, part of it was because I want us to just do that, feel that, get more comfortable with that. But I think it's also like a learned skill to say like, okay, like, me and my wife, we're in this big fight. I'm 100% right. She's totally wrong. So like, how do we get to the solution, But I think to like actually do that exercise of sit down, read 139, the Psalm 139, and have a posture of saying like, God, like, reveal to me what I need to see here. Read those words and sit with it. Put a timer on my phone for 5 minutes and try to think about nothing else and just say like, God, speak to me in this. I believe the Holy Spirit speaks to us in that. But I think creating that space and that time, like, I think we don't know how to do that. Like it really is like a learned skill to listen and to listen to other people, but also to listen to God. And, I wish there was more ways for me as a pastor to like convey that, and teach those kind of things. But the problem is, we do a weekend seminar on like how to listen to God, like 2 people come and they're the people that are best at listening to God. So it doesn't seem like people understand there's like a real need for that. I think people don't see the need they have for that, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
do you ever start your mornings off like that where you have some space?
Yeah, I try my best to. I used to have a Grayton Beach pass, and like me and the Lord, we just met at Grayton Beach, but then my pass
back when God loved you.
Yeah, that's right. Now I don't have that anymore, and so I'm stuck with, just poor man walking to the beach now. But like, finding those spaces, finding those slots. There's a pastor I really respect. His name's John Tyson, and he has this funny line. He says, I need about 2 hours in the day before I turn my phone on, before I do anything else, before I'm with people, before I feel like I'm the person I want to bring to the world. And I thought that was really funny, and I've wrestled with that of like, how much time do I need to do that? And it might be a lot more than 2 hours, but like, just that, like, do I really think there's value in that? Do I really think there's value in waking up and like pray? And is there really value in waking up and read? And is there really value in waking up and like spending this time that like shapes my heart in a way to go into the day, eyes wide open to the grace and gifts that is all around me? But if I just like wake up, grab my phone, look at social media, get out, kids are late, we're running, this wasn't packed, we get in, of course, like it's all annoying. And it's like, but am I really creating space in front of that? I'm not a morning person at all. So for me, that really becomes like late at night for me. Like once everybody's gone to bed and everything's down, like I can really like get some good space there. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. It's like the Abraham Lincoln quote, if I had 5 hours to chop down a tree, 4 hours.
4 hours on an axe, sharpening it. Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And I think that's some of that stuff we want to complicate it, but it is like, it's just doing that. But I also think when we say that, like, if you grew up in like church culture, you hear things like, have your quiet time with the Lord, and like I say that, I don't mean to mock that, but like, but I'm mocking it because I think we say it, but we don't know what it means. Yeah. Like I think the average person in the church who's just like, never really been taught that. They're like, I should read my Bible, but I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, where do I do that? Like, when do I do that? Like, what is, if I were to spend, I have a spiritual director, and he said to me the other day, he said, have you been spending good time with the Lord lately? And I said, Yeah, and he said, all right, the way he phrased it was, he said, if you had an hour of quiet, just you and God, do you know what you would do with it? Like with the hour? Or would you just kind of like sit there and be like, and thankfully I felt like I've been in enough environments and like that's some grace I've received. I'm like, yeah, no, I think I know what I would do with that hour, but I thought, I bet most people in my church wouldn't have a good answer to that question.
Yeah.
You know, like if you just had an hour and said, all right, go be with the Lord, I don't think they'd know what to do. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that is like a skill that we can learn of like different ways to read scripture, different ways to pray, different ways to meditate, different ways to like, you know, turn our attention to God and to read Psalm 139 and say, God, reveal those things to me. Like, I think a lot of people don't know how to do that. And I think we can probably do a better job of, you know, creating resources, tools for like, this is how we do. They're all over, but I think it's, I don't know, kind of rambling on that, but I just think that's
like, would it be like individually you helped it almost, I don't know, you almost, sometimes I think in the beginning for me, when I became a Christian, I mean, I jokingly said it to you, but it was true. Like one of the first books I started reading was Revelation. Right. I was 17 years old and fourth time in a treatment center is a long term. Like, you know, it was for the repeat offenders. Mm-hmm. The great state of Texas. I had told a judge to go F himself. He did not appreciate that.
That went over well.
And. You know, and I was supposed to go to jail after that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but he, like, when God blew me up in there, it was like I was a baby again, in a sense. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I knew there was a God. He was actually real. Actually real. That it's not a concept. It's not that, you know, it's not a church like activity. That there was actually a God. And I did not believe there was actually a God before that. I don't think. I didn't know. Like, I mean, still to today, it is probably in the most deepest part of me, and Jesus is real. Like, and I knew that. And then the second revelation I got that day was, I'm going to have to be around Christians. And it was kind of like, like I still really, really, really struggle with Christian culture. Not as bad as I used to, but I still really struggle with it. But the first premise that God was actually real, it's like, well, I'm going to be around, like, you know, and so when I started reading and doing meditation, I just started doing everything. I was like, I was journaling. I was praying. I organized this little prayer group of all these thugs in this place. And they were all like, what has happened to you, dude? Like, you were the craziest one. Now you're, you know, crying and talking about Jesus all day. Like, you know, I don't know.
That's tough. Well, I think where that's so important, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a framework for me that has been really helpful, and I think has been really helpful for our church over the last couple of years, especially wrestling with like Christian culture and what does all that look like, is I think a lot of us have like an achievement mindset, and really grace is not to be achieved, grace is to be received. And so when we can consider our relationship with God as a receiving of grace that allows us to then go and live differently, I think we see the whole thing differently. I think we see God differently. I think we see our neighbors differently. We see our friends differently. When we see, like, when you talk about an hour with God, like when I use that phrase, like quiet time, you know, and I kind of say that jokingly, like, have your devotional time with the Lord, right? Like, I think I say that with that snark because I think we've seen that as like something we have to achieve. And it's like, okay, before I can start my day, I got to like prove to the Lord that I care enough to have like done the work. Like, I read the Bible, I wrote the thing, I did it, I achieved it. Now let's go like deal with the crap of the day. But like when you see that hour is like a time where like I'm positioning myself under like a fountain of grace that like fills me, and you see it as that, like I would fight everything in me to like carve out that hour. You know, it's like going back to the gas pump, you know, it's like, tanker. It's like, you know, like that's where I like receive, like I don't read the Bible to achieve it. I read the Bible to be reminded of the grace I've been given and like receive that. I don't journal to like say like I did 48 pages this month. You know, it's like I do that to say like I need to think about the grace I've been given and like receive that. And the way I receive it best is when I reflect on it in this way. So I'm going to do that. It's like a guy I watch every morning is John Ortberg. He puts out these YouTube videos on a channel, and I watch him every morning, not because like I have to say like I did a devotional, but because the way he speaks life of who Jesus is, like then it's like, okay, like, yeah, like that's who I want to be today. And I've received that. So now I can go give that. And I think that idea of like devotion time, quiet time, we've made it so much about achievement versus receiving. And when we can reframe that as like, this is where I get filled so that I can go be a blessing. I need to be reminded that I've been blessed so that I can go be a blessing and live that like that. That's a different framework.
Can you even think about it in your experience of time? I mean, it's the same activity. It's night and day difference.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
So like days that you've just gone, okay, I checked it off the list.
Yeah.
Which for me, I don't know percentages. I mean, at least half the time, that I've done that.
Yeah.
Or I've been in seasons where I'm just doing it, but it is me doing a worthless activity.
Yeah.
Versus those times where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna spend some time with you.
Yeah.
Like and a lot of times, what happens with me in that is I won't get very far in the Bible.
Yeah.
And I'll just dig into one of the verses or a couple of the verses. You know, I'll have my little. I have my little thesaurus. Paper.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You know, and I'll dig a little bit into it. I don't get probably crazy Greek.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
Hebrew like you do, but I'll dig into it a little bit. But then I've also been.
I will say I was so good at Greek, I took it twice.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's so easy. I don't know why. Yeah. I do
Glad
think
you got that.
Yeah. In seminary, I still feel like I'm recovering from seminary in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It made it it made it achievement.
Yeah.
It made the Bible achievement.
Yeah. That's interesting.
The culture around there was very much, let me be the biggest intellectual here around the Bible. I struggled with it big time.
Yeah.
Even in evangelism. What's interesting, I took this one class with Evangelism 101 or whatever. Yeah. And, you know, they teach you Romans Road and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And this is how you lead someone to the Lord.
Yeah.
In that class, they did some survey where they said, you know, how many people have you guys, you know, been asked to pray with to come to the Lord?
Yeah.
And out of everyone in there, like, mine was like at that point was like multiple people a week.
Yeah.
Because I was dealing with so many drug addicts and alcoholics and sponsoring guys. And everyone else there, it was like hardly anyone. And I was the worst one in that class with Romans Road and these like deals. Some of the way they would ask me questions of, you know, well, tell us some of the times. I'm like, okay, one guy was addicted to heroin and we hit his third step, and I say, well, I know it's Jesus, but you can choose, you know, if you want to know the Lord. And they're like, yes. I'm like, well, you want to know about him or you want to know him now? Yeah. Like now? Yeah. You know, to guys that are going, hey, I can't stand, I refuse to believe in a God that loves, that hates homosexuals and no sex before marriage and, number 3, sends people to hell. Yeah. Those are usually the 3 that guys would tell me. And out of those 3, unless they were homosexual, the one they really cared about was no sex before marriage. To be honest, that's they didn't care about hell. They cared about no sex before marriage. Yeah. And there's times I'd be like, well, then why do you want what we have? Yeah. You know, that's the last. You know, you're supposed to tell him he doesn't send people to hell. And take them through this like theological framework, which I'm not saying that you don't do that, but in those times, I would, some of the time, would just pause and just, okay, Lord, what do you want me to say? Yeah. And I had a relation, like the relational equity with guys and God had placed them at a certain time. And then there's tons of people that I've impacted them along the journey.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this though, every person that's come to know the Lord, that I've prayed with, has come to know the Lord. There have been a lot of different people in their life along the way.
That's right.
And I was just at that place to play that position.
Yeah, Scripture
had
talks
nothing
about
to do
that.
with me.
Some water, some plant, some reed.
It's not Jesus' sales team.
That's right. That's
you know,
right.
You're not a closer for him.
That's right.
You know, he
that
does
goes
it
back
all,
to those like
and it gives
lead
you
and lag
freedom.
measures, right? Like that whole thing. It's like it's not that you have to like close 50 deals this month. It's like how do you just like be faithful where you are at all times and like put yourself in those positions on the front end. Like, were you available? Were you open? Like that's the lead measure, you know? And like, like I want to be that.
And it looks different. I think it looks different in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But I do know 100% that never once was I the only person for someone. Right. I'm not saying that I guess it couldn't be, but I mean, just in general, there's always multiple people that played roles.
That's right.
Along the way because no one can get glory for it.
That's right.
No one can be like, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't know the Lord.
That's right.
You know?
That's good, man.
Which the church I grew up with was that kind of church pride. I don't know, man. I almost call it demonic, to be honest, because it's, dude, I cannot change a heart.
Yeah, that's right.
Legitly.
That's right.
Maybe I can manipulate and convince someone.
Yeah.
But it's not going to take.
Yeah, that's right.
It's going to be false.
That's right.
God's the only one who really changes the heart.
That's right. That's right.
You know?
That's good, man.
Which gives you freedom. Mm-hmm. And being completely honest, completely open, sharing your vulnerability, sharing everything.
That's right.
Because it's not up to you.
That's right. That's good, man.
You know?
You should host a podcast.
I should host a podcast. No, I'm just kidding. you guys should host a podcast here. That'd be fun.
That's great.
Is being a pastor, like in that role, do you have some days that you're going, man, why don't I just do a 9 to 5 or something like that?
I think everybody does at some level, but I also think, I think in a human sense, like everybody questions those kind of things. But I do think, I think I'm in a unique spot where we just have a really beautiful leadership team, like wonderful people. There's so much health around where we are that I think I sometimes feel a little guilty that a lot of the challenges, you can look up stats on like pastors' health, pastors' mental health, and they're like wild. Yeah. And it's a grace that I'm very aware of that I've received, that we're surrounded by such good people in our world that have helped, continue to help me to live into my calling. In fact, we have a meeting today about like reassessing my job description to say like, okay, the church is growing, things are changing. Like, how do we make sure like you're in a place that's like healthy and good and thriving? And that's a prayer I wish I had for so many pastors, is that they got to experience that the way I have, because I think that keeps me out of those holes of like having to fight with all this, not fight, but just having to like this tension or these things that are like so peripheral becoming the main things. Mm-hmm. Like I think a lot of pastors, to tighten that up, a lot of pastors end up spending a lot of time majoring on the minors. And I think I've been in an environment that has allowed me to stay focused on the majors, which keeps me so like filled.
Yeah.
So.
Do you meet with pastors sometimes? I
got a group I meet with every Monday morning on Zoom, and then another group I meet with once a month, and then once a month, a lot of the pastors in town here, some friends, we get together, eat lunch, and it's just being tight in those relationships is so valuable.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of other ones really struggling or taking on that role, or feel like a weight that they have to be some sort of superman spiritually, or?
Yeah, I think it's hard because like if you were to go start a software company today, I think you have like a formula of like how to do that again.
Yeah.
And I think in church world, there's the body of Christ, right? And there's this mosaic of leaders, of gifts, abilities. And so different churches have different giftings, just the way that different pastors have different callings and giftings. And so I think there can be such this plethora of like what this could look like and be healthy and beautiful. I mean, we could do a whole nother hour to me on like the contextualization of church. I think the internet's been a weird thing for the church because like people want to copy what other successful churches are doing, but generally when you look at the most fruitful churches, they're the most contextual churches. So like you look at like a church in Atlanta, you look at a church in Southern California, you look at a church in Chicago, and you're like, we need to be that at the beach. But it's like the reason they're that is because they're doing church in Atlanta in a way that should look like in that culture, in that context, and being a reaction to that and being a space that like invites them to a way that's different than what this place in Atlanta is. But that's not our same issues and our same problems. So I think getting vision, mission, values right seems like such a cliche thing, and people are always like, oh, we got to go do that. But like, I just think if you don't have clarity on that, as a church, you're always going to struggle, and there's always going to, we should do it this way, we should do it that way, because like, there's so many beautiful ways to do this. And it's a weird problem that people have.
Yeah, that's
without like expanding that for another hour.
Well, think of like if a church in Washington State,
absolutely,
versus here in the Panhandle of Florida, those are two different environments.
That's right.
You know, and so how they do Sunday mornings and how they do throughout their week. It's going to look different. And
I think like it's so important, like for local churches today, because like, you know, you said information, like we can get the information, like you can find the best preachers in the world, whatever lane you want that to be in, like, and you can find them and watch them on YouTube. Like right now we could find hundreds, you know, like that's a breeze. But I think for a local pastor these days, it's like, how do you create like a human experience where we encounter Jesus together in a way that feels like we're a part of a community? And so like, it's just dumb, but like for me, like once a week, I try to work in something that references a place I was in our community this week, right? Because we're here, like we're all living here together. Like, and so, you know, like I make a lot of golf cart jokes, you know, it's like golf cart on Highway 98, because like we get that, like the smartest dude in the world in, you know, Rome preaching from whatever, like he didn't get that. Like, so it's like, how do we do that here? And I think that's going to be a big move of the church in the future, is figuring out like, how do you be contextual? How do we be the community of the people of God here in this place? And there's a lot to say there.
Yeah. The grandfather great and past doesn't translate over.
Exactly, that's right.
They don't
that's
understand.
Right. Like we had a moment of lament in the service when I lost mine. I was like, y'all need to know, like I'm not myself today. It's my first week without it, you know? And like, and there's a sense of like, yeah, we get that, you know? Like that's home, you know? And I think the church needs to feel like home.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So, a home you'd want to invite other people into to go a step further.
Yeah. So. Well, let's do that other hour. We'll schedule that other hour.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. Love it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. And, dude, 24 years. Congrats.
Thank you.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I hope you, like, have a big party planned.
I know. It's pretty wild. I've been sober longer than I was drinking.
Dude, that's wild. Yeah, that's good.
I think I can handle it now. I think I'm going to give it a shot tonight.
That's good.